Hello YouTube, it's Mr. Mags here, back with another stupid Nintendo article. And I have been waiting so long for another chance to dunk on TheGamer. They have been they haven't been quiet, but recently the articles they've been putting out, or lists, whatever, have been dumb, if not inoffensive. Like, a lot of their lists are just kind of pointless, or like might have stuff that just maybe shouldn't be there, but like generally at least half the entries are fine, and like they don't just get blatant random information wrong like they used to. Until today. So today we will be going over TheGamer's 10 fighting type Pokemon that make no sense. I'm going to go ahead and warn you, there is only a single Pokemon in this list that I disagree with their typing. Their typing, period. Not even, arguably two, but one in particular that I disagree with their typing, not necessarily disagree that they should be a fighting type. So, let's get into this. Fighting type Pokemon are often most coveted due to their skill set. However, not all of them make sense. Here are some of the most confusing ones. So, again, in classic gamer fashion, they just like have a random overarching statement that doesn't mean anything and just kind of assumes everyone agrees with this. Like, fighting types are cool. Some of my favorite Pokemon of all time are fighting types. Blaziken is my favorite Pokemon. He's part fighting. But, like, generally, if you were to ask, I feel personally, most, like, entry-level trainers probably would say fire type is their favorite type. Just kind of in general, because the fire starter is generally viewed as the best in general. Fire type, again, like some of my all-time favorite Pokemon are fire types, see Blaziken. So, I'm not necessarily saying that people don't like fighting types, it's just kind of weird that that's how you led with when, like, I feel no type in particular is coveted more than others, but if there was, I feel personally that it would be fire, but let's move on. I'll save the nitpicking for later. Fighting type Pokemon is one of the coolest varieties in the entire series, with a bunch of unique ones to pick from. Hang on. Fighting type Pokemon is one of the coolest varieties in the entire series, and with a bunch of unique ones to pick from, there are bound to be a bunch that is really weird. Some fighting types don't look like they have anything to do with martial arts or physical power, or they just simply don't make any sense at all. This list will go over some of the weirdest fighting types in the franchise and show players that not every martial arts creature makes sense. From Heracross to Phalanx, here are 10 fighting types that don't make any sense. Okay, so what you'll notice throughout this entire article is that the arguments that was his name, Michael, pretty much all the arguments that Michael makes are, this guy doesn't look like a fighting type, his arms are too small, or his body doesn't look like he'd be able to take enough hits. But, like, there's more to being a fighting type than just punching or taking hits. Like, he just assumes that every single fighting type has to be Machamp. If you don't look like a Machamp, then you can't be a fighting type. That's essentially what this boils down to. And I'd like to think that that is the main thing that differs Pokemon from all these other Pokemon clones, is that within each individual type, they're allowed to be super creative, and even if there's just like a small element of whatever type they have, can be completely valid. And I'll go over more of those as we go on the list here. So, like you said, he starts with Heracross. I might not read every single one of these entries, but this one in particular I am definitely going to read. This creature is a bug, and it doesn't really look like it will be able to fight very well in terms of martial arts. The only thing it has going for it is its horn on its head, however that's more of a bug type attribute instead of fighting. Its arms are tiny and its legs are weak, so it's very bizarre that this ever was classified as a fighting type. Perhaps it will get a new regional form in the future that will fix it. However, that won't change its Generation 1 version from having a weird classification. So, I will suppress my anger at that last line for just a couple of minutes to explain the first paragraph. I'll get back to that. If you know anything about Pokemon, you see the glaring issue. It's even underlined, but whatever. So, okay, so that's a Heracross. Based on a stag beetle, if I'm not mistaken. So, rhinoceros beetle. Based on probably a fusion of a bunch of different kind of beetle, but like specifically probably based on a rhinoceros beetle. I don't know if it's like if this is actually a thing in Japanese culture, but I know that in more recent Kirby games, actually I think this is also the case back in one of the earlier ones from like late 90s, early 2000s, there is a bug enemy that you absorb and you get the power of throwing stuff. That's Sumo Kirby. So yeah, I don't know if it's just a weird connection between these two franchises or if it's actually a thing in Japanese culture that certain kind of beetles have immense throwing power. But regardless, that's Heracross's whole thing. Heracross isn't the ultra combative puncher that Hitmonchan or kicker of Hitmonlee or sumo wrestler of Throw. His thing is that he tosses people in the air with his horn. He has his arms are pretty bulky. I know that the Gen 3 spray isn't really doing it justice, but his arms are actually kind of long and are bulky enough to be, decent enough of a weapon to hit people with. So even if he didn't just throw people, who cares? If anything, it's weird that Pinsir isn't part fighting, since they both learn. I think Pinsir still learns more fighting type moves than bug moves, and his Mega isn't even part fighting. So, yeah, I'm sorry that you don't understand that throwing is also a very important aspect of fighting something, and fighting can consist of more than just punches and kicks. So yeah, there's nothing that needs to be fixed in a regional variant. There's nothing about this Pokemon that doesn't necessarily scream fighting type. There are several Pokemon that do scream fighting type that are completely different types, or there are certain Pokemon that look one type but are completely different, like Sneasel. If you looked at Sneasel, I'd obviously be able to know it was a dark type, but an ice type, there's no possible way you would know that Sneasel just by looking at it were an ice type unless someone told you. Same with Weavile, they didn't fix that. So if I were just to look at Sneasel, I would probably guess dark fighting. That's just kind of how Pokemon is. Not every single Pokemon has to look exactly archetypically, like how their type usually looks. So, yeah, Heracross's main thing is that he throws opponents around using that giant horn. Yeah, it is more of a bug-type attribute, but he uses that bug-type attribute to fight things. It's not that hard to understand. Okay, so let me get back to the glaring, huge elephant here. Perhaps it will get a new regional variant in the future that will fix it. However, that won't change its Generation 1 version from having a weird classification. I can only assume that this person in their head mixed up Pinsir with Heracross, because Pinsir is in Gen 1, and Pinsir and Heracross have a lot of similarities. I think they have the same base stat total, similar attack stats. Their stats are pretty much the same, just a couple are swapped, and they both have Mega Evolutions. So they're related, so I could, to an extent, understand how you would switch that. But I feel like if you're writing, I know this isn't an academic paper, but like if you're writing anything that will go up online forever, you should at least try to get your facts straight. Like, okay, so maybe it is just because I am such a huge Pokemon fan, but people people who try to act like they are holier than thou and they get to determine what is and is not certain types, they should know what region Heracross comes from. I feel like that should just be a baseline of like how they go about doing stuff. Like, don't try to preach to me about how Pokemon should be if you don't even know what region a Pokemon comes from. Anyway, moving on. Meditite. This creature has two types, one being fighting, the other being psychic. Its psychic part makes sense. However, it doesn't look like this creature would be able to do much fighting with its hands and feet. Because of this, it deserves a spot in this list to be noted as one of the most bizarre fighting types in the franchise. Okay. It just really doesn't look like it could be a fighting type, and its appearance doesn't look like that of a martial artist. Okay, so Meditite is based on like kind of like a monkey creature thing who is constantly meditating. That's where the psychic part comes from, but also it is a heavily believed thing in most Asian cultures and like even some subsects of Western cultures that if you train your mind, if you're able to like enhance your mind, you'll also be able to enhance your bodily strength. That's Meditite and Medicham's whole thing. They meditate for hours and hours a day to enhance their psychic abilities and enhance their physical strength. Also, what do you mean he doesn't look like he'd be able to fight? Like, he's like a little monkey creature who like looks pretty spry. I mean, yeah, his arms are kind of small, but like so are Pancham's. Pancham's pretty small. He's a fighting type, and then he evolves into a big gorilla. Like, I again, because this Pokemon doesn't fit the stereotype of huge, bulking, muscular men-shaped Pokemon like Machamp and Conkeldurr and I mean Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, etc., or like Hariyama from the same gen, it shouldn't be a fighting type, which is just ridiculous. Scraggy. So I'm not actually going to read this one, but Scraggy, again, like, just by looking at it, sure, maybe you wouldn't expect it to be a fighting type. Maybe, like, I would probably, if I didn't know, I would probably guess maybe normal something. But if you told me it was dark, I'd believe that. If you told me it was fighting, sure. It's based on, like, a hoodlum or whatever, like, a stereotypical, like, gang member type thing from the 80s who were pretty, who were pretty rough and, like, got into fights all the time. So that just kind of makes sense. That's just kind of the atmosphere around this Pokemon. They constantly get into fights between gangs of different Scraggy and Scrafty. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And they don't even really give a good explanation as to what type they think it should be. They just say it shouldn't be fighting. But okay. Phalanx. Phalanx is the one Pokemon on this list that I would truly argue the typing is wrong. I can completely understand why it is a fighting type. It's based on like a Roman cavalry of soldiers in a line. There's a word for that, but I can't think of it right now. In a line. So yeah, like Roman soldiers were pretty buff and like ready to fight. So it makes sense that a Pokemon based on that could be a fighting type. I also think that it should have been either Bug or Steel, just by looking at it. Since it is so heavily armored, and it's clearly based on a Caterpillar, it's not. I'm not upset necessarily that it's not one of those types. I'm more so upset at the fact that within Gen 8 alone, there were 3 different Pokemon that were pure fighting types that should have been dual types. And if one of them were a dual type, then I wouldn't care about any of them. Like Surfetch, who's actually on this list later, I don't really care. Like we already have a fighting flying type in Hawlucha, so he can be pure flying. Whatever. It's a little weird how it doesn't just evolve from Farfetch. You had to have a regional variant in order to evolve it. Why not just have regular Farfetch evolve into a flying fighting type? But whatever. And then Octolocked is an octopus who you find in the water. I'm pretty sure you only find them in a special location in the water. So why are they part water? And then he for the longest time, I could not get it out of my head that he wasn't at least part bug or steel. Like, I keep trying to hit him with fire type moves, and it's just not working. Or like fighting moves, thinking it'd be super effective against steel, and it's just not. So this is the one Pokemon that I don't necessarily agree with their typing, but not that I don't think it shouldn't be fighting type. Their logic is fine. I get what they're going for, saying like like just by looking at it, you wouldn't be able to guess that it's a fighting type at all just by looking at it, but based on what it is based on, it makes sense enough that it would be at least part fighting. Hope it made sense there. Cobalian. I'm not going to entertain this one. It's a motif from the Three Musketeers. Swords. They decided that all of them would be part fighting. Like, you know, they all have swords. They were all, like ready to fight at any moment. Like it makes sense. They decided for all 4 of them to be fighting type. Should all of them maybe be steel type? I don't know, maybe, but they decide all 4 of them be fighting. So yeah, just by looking at it, I wouldn't really expect fighting. I don't know, maybe expect electric based on the weird squigglies and the thing on its shoulder, or possibly water if I was that superficial, or even normal, I don't know. But fighting, I wouldn't personally guess, but I'm fine with it. Like, it's the motif they went with, and not every single Pokemon has to look exactly like their typing. Oh, I forgot to read this part first for Cobalian. I will entertain this little bit. This first paragraph here. It can learn a bunch of powerful fighting type moves, and some of them don't make sense because it doesn't even have fists. Okay, so Staraptor can learn close combat. It doesn't have fists. Cobalian isn't over here throwing out drain punches and focus punches. I'm pretty sure the only fighting moves it could really learn are maybe superpower, maybe, but I know it can learn close combat and sacred sword. I'm not sure of what else, but I know of those specifically. Close combat can just kind of be, using whatever you have to hit them super hard many times. Like, sure, use your hooves. That's fine. Just because it doesn't have fists means it can't use fighting moves? That's stupid. That's ridiculous. There are other ways to hurt people. Timber. Okay. This strong Pokemon makes sense in theory. However, it has to lug around a piece of equipment with it everywhere, which would make it extremely slow in battle, which is a bad attribute for a fighter. Fighting is not just a test of strength, is also a test of agility, which is one reason why this creature makes no sense. Okay, first of all, that sentence makes no sense because you forgot at least one word between strength and is. Second, there are many slow fighting types. There are several, like a lot of slow fighting types. It's kind of a part of, you just kind of assume that most fighting types are slow. Even Machamp, I think, has like 60 base speed, if it's not even lower than that. So I just kind of feel like speed isn't necessarily a huge factor. So does this apply to Conkeldurr? Does this apply to his evolution Gardner? Because they hold bigger things around, and the wouldn't holding two giant cinder blocks make Conkeldurr even slower? He shouldn't be able to fight with those, right? Unless this Pokemon evolved to fight with those things and use those for both offense and defense. Also, it makes complete sense for a fighting type to be carrying something like this, to showcase how strong it is. Because for something that height, a big log like that, probably, fairly heavy relative to its size. So it shows just how strong it is, but also it can use it as a weapon. So I don't necessarily love when Pokemon hold items, but I feel like this kind of works. Hopefully you will get a regional variant in the future that is more logical, come on. But it was never a fan favorite in the series, so it probably won't get anything new. At least it's a strong creature that fans can use competitively, but otherwise, this Pokemon and its evolutions are extremely weird in their typing. What typing would you give it? Looking at that thing, what typing would you give that thing? It has muscles literally bulging out of its head. What other typing would it have? Just because you think it's slow, it has to not be a fighting type anymore? That's ridiculous. Okay. Meloetta. So, the Meloetta form that is fighting, they don't think should be a fighting type. Okay. Oh, yeah, I need to read this one too. Dang it. I was hoping to not have to read all of them, but fine. This creature can sing anyone to sleep and is one of the rarest Pokemon in all of Generation 5, because the Mythicals only get one per game. But anyway, it's a very cute creature, which is just one reason why it doesn't make too much sense, because although there are some cute fighting types, most of them are big and brawny. You already said there's some small cute ones, so this isn't an exception. It's just a thing that can happen, but whatever. It just doesn't seem like it would be a fighting type physically, because of its small body and weak strength. This is definitely a creature that would be better with special attacks, so it's bizarre that the developers gave it a fighting type. Okay, first of all, there can be special fighting types. That's a thing that could happen. Lucario, despite what people actually think, its base form, Lucario, does actually have higher special attack, so it's possible. Second, Meloetta has two different forms. One form being normal psychic, the other form being normal fighting. Yes, normal psychic and normal fighting. The normal psychic one does have higher special attack. That's its whole gimmick. It uses the move to switch between the forms so it can better utilize different strategies. It can better utilize different moves. So yes, the normal psychic one it does have higher special attack, because it makes sense that, moves like Hyper Voice and Psychic are special. So yes, make that one special. But then it can transform into a physical attacker with a Meloetta Pirouette form, I think. And that one does have higher attack. It's like they didn't do any research at all. But even if we are to assume that the Pirouette form doesn't look like a fighting type, let's just go off that logic. So there have been several different forms of media where either a fighting, someone who's good at fighting then learns how to dance and they're good at it, or vice versa. Someone who's really good at dance kind of uses the way they dance to incorporates that into actually battling, and it's very successful. So why can't a Pokemon, if we take a Pokemon example, Curlia, a psychic now fairy type, is seen as like a kind of ballerina type, and usually it would evolve into Gardevoir, but if you give it a Dawnstone, it would evolve into a Gallade, a fighting type. This ballet dancer learned that it can use its ballet abilities for for a competitive advantage, and it evolved into a fighting type. It's very possible, even within the Pokemon's logic. So why then couldn't Meloetta's pirouette form use her ballet abilities to fight? It makes perfect sense. If you take what they are based off of into account, which this site never seems to do, it makes sense. So, moving on. Surfetched. This is the other one that I kind of disagree with their typing. I feel like if they were, again, if one of the three I mentioned earlier were dual type, I wouldn't have a problem with any of them, but because all three of them are pure fighting, it's just kind of weird. So, I understand completely why you would think this weird duck should at least be flying type. I think it clearly we've already established that things that hold stuff or things that are based on swords like the like the musketeers, they're generally considered fighting types, so it makes sense that he would be too, but he maybe could have also been flying, but whatever. Keldeo. Again, I'm not gonna talk about this one because I already discussed that in full, like why it makes complete sense, why the all four of these are fighting type is just the motif they chose to go with, and Pokemon don't necessarily have to look exactly like the type they're given. It can happen. Like, if anything, I feel Cobalian should have been more armored up to emphasize its steel type. But like the other three, you can clearly tell just by looking at them. Maybe not Terrakion, because I still get confused every now and again whether or not it's rock or ground. I think it's rock. But the other three, you can really tell, at least generally, what their type probably is just by looking at them. And then you just slap on fighting, because that's just what they went with. Not that hard. Now this last one. This guy went after one of my favorite Pokemon. This is an easily top 10 Pokemon for me consistently. Like, some days it's probably top 5. And just by looking at it, just looking at this next Pokemon, I don't know how anyone wouldn't be able to guess that it's the fighting type. Based on what it's based on what it looks like, just how it moves around, it's clearly a fighting type. But what I'm talking about is Berlume. Just look at that thing. Look. Yes, its arms are small. Its arms are pretty short. But it has huge feet. Also, it's based on a kangaroo. Have you ever seen a kangaroo kick somebody? Yeah, kangaroos can kill with one kick. They stand up on their tail and kick you. It's awesome. So a kangaroo-based Pokemon should be a fighting type. I don't know why Berlume is a kangaroo. He was originally, a mushroom thingy that became a kangaroo. Like, there's nothing in Shroomish that indicated it would be a kangaroo, but I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I love his design. It makes perfect sense that a kangaroo Pokemon would be fighting type. But now let's read why this person doesn't think that Berlume should be a fighting type. This one is just downright weird and doesn't have any explanation. Not a single, no explanation at all for its fighting type at all. This creature's arms and feet look very frail, and its body doesn't look like it could take too many hits, which is a negative trait for a fighting type Pokemon. Oh my goodness. So, every single fighting type Pokemon has to be super bulky, has to be a huge beefcake. Medicham, I know you already said that Meditite doesn't really look like one, but Medicham also isn't super beefy. Hawlucha doesn't look super beefy. That's clearly a fighting type wrestler thing. Like, Lucario even looks pretty frail. There are several Pokemon out there that are fighting type that don't, just by looking at it, don't look super beefy. And that's fine. These Pokemon clearly emphasize attacking over getting attacked. and this is showcased by their stat distribution. I think Berlume's HP is 70, defense is 80, which is actually higher than I think it should be, and special defense is like 65 or something like that. So its defenses are fine, but not fantastic. So when you say there's no explanation for it to be a fighting type, when it's based on a kangaroo and it has huge feet that can, that can kick pretty hard. Should his arm be longer? Probably. Like, how are you going to use Mach Punch with those little stubs? But like, just look at that picture. Like, if they wanted to emphasize how weird this thing is to be a fighting type, don't use that picture. Don't look like it's pointing at you and saying, "I'm going to punch you in the face." Like, that's a weird picture to pick for this article. But okay. Berlume won't get a revamp in the future, so fans are stuck with this one how it is, but at least it's powerful with its own unique moveset. Giving a fighting type to this Pokemon was probably a mistake, and the developers only realized it after Ruby and Sapphire were released. That line right there made me want to make this entire video. Saying that giving Berlume a fighting type was a mistake by the developers. I don't think you realize just how much effort goes in to designing Pokemon. I don't think you understand just how much research, just how much inspiration goes into designing each and every single Pokemon. And then you're going to come here and say that they just accidentally gave it a new type, accidentally gave it Mach Punch when it evolved, accidentally let it learn Dynamic Punch on Level Up. Sky Uppercut was its signature move to an extent. Like, that was them and I know that Blaziken could learn it too, but like, they wouldn't accidentally give a Pokemon a random type and then accidentally give it all these random moves that benefit that type. That doesn't make any sense. By that logic, they accidentally gave Pinsir the bug type because it doesn't learn any bug types. Bug type moves. Like, I think in Gen 1 it only learned normal and fighting moves. Again, I have no idea why they decided to base this mushroom Pokemon also on a kangaroo, but I love it. And they established maybe they made the design for the Pokemon first and then gave it the typing. Obviously, they're going to keep grass because it's based on shroom issues, grass type, and it's a mushroom, and mushrooms are foresty or whatever. So grass type makes perfect sense. And they're like, we base it off a kangaroo. Kangaroos like to punch and kick people for no reason, so we'll just also make it a fighting type and have its moveset kind of reflect that. I personally feel that they should have made at least one of his level up moves based on him kicking things. He should have done like Mega Kick or some other kicking attack, like Trop Kick. At some point, Berlume needs to learn Trop Kick. I know he's not even in Gen 8, but if he does ever get into Gen 8, he needs to learn Trop Kick. That move just makes so much sense for him. But anyway, they could have gone even. My point is, they could have gone even further in the whole idea of him being a kangaroo, but they decided to make him a fighting type, give him fighting moves. It wasn't a mistake. They designed this Pokemon, gave it its types, made the moveset around it. Just because it's kind of frail doesn't mean it can't fight back. It has a 130 base attack. That is insane. And it will use that. Actually, it has the same attack stat as Machamp, if I'm not mistaken, 130. Oh my goodness. Like, I swear, no one at TheGamer, I say this every single time, no one at TheGamer seems to understand anything about Pokemon. They don't understand what goes into making Pokemon. They don't understand the origins of each individual Pokemon. They clearly don't know how to research. Like, Bulbapedia is right there. Bulbapedia tells you, like, types, the Japanese name, if that helps you, the region it comes from, the the extra random trivia, the name origin, the species origin, like what it's based on, where you can catch. Like there's so much stuff just on Bulbapedia. If just a cursory glance at that site will give you a general idea of why this Pokemon is the way it is. And you're going to come over here and say that Berlume was a mistake to be a fighting type when it was clearly based on a kangaroo. Sure. Why not? Okay, so is there anyone out there who feels like any of these Pokemon don't deserve to be fighting types? Are there any other Pokemon that they didn't mention that you feel should or shouldn't be fighting types? Are there any Pokemon that you feel are completely mistyped entirely, even like just looking at their design, you think they'd be one type, but they're a completely different type? Let me know all that down below. I'd like to have a discussion going, and I'll see you later.